Okay, in the last two sessions, we looked at two different approaches in terms of assessing risk. We looked at the classical risk management methodology that's covered by the standard. And in the last session, we looked at more in terms of process, reliability, and assessing that via a sort of an FMEA approach. In this module, we're really going to take a bit of a step back from the tools and really sort of explore what are the practical ways you can improve your ability of your organization to balance risks and manage risk, not just at the board level, but also throughout your organization. So we look at some of the practical ways that you can approach it in terms of increasing your ability to do that. We'll also look at examples of different companies where they would sit on the maturity model in terms of their ability to balance risks, and also what are the sort of practical ways they could employ in terms of how they move through the maturity model in terms of improving their ability to manage risk throughout the organization. Now, the first practical tip is really quite obvious, but it's often forgotten. Is learn from your past. So one of the learnings of many disasters over the last couple of decades, what disasters such as the Deepwater Horizon catastrophe in 2010, which is the biggest environmental catastrophe in the history of the US, certainly, and in the Shuttle Columbia disaster in 2003, is these two events. There were signals in the system that were actually preceded the event that were telling the organisation and individuals something bad was going to happen. So these disasters didn't come from completely out of the blue. And in the case of the Deepwater Horizon issue, basically the report said the system was blinking red well before the event. There were lots of signals in the system that were telling the organizations that really something bad was going to happen and they really needed to act. These signals were obviously ignored, and obviously it resulted in these sort of disasters. And we'll come on to in subsequent slides that there are similar signals within your QMS in terms of there are indications that things are moving in the wrong direction. There are little hints that you really should start be paying attention to certain aspects of your quality system, and we'll come on to that in terms of what they are, in terms of and how you should use that information to start to take action. Another big learning is actually at times the worst enemy is yourself, in terms of even though we feel we're intelligent and we're clever individuals and actually we understand risk and we can assess that quite adequately and we understand the tools, but very often it's our own intelligence that gets in the way in terms of making bad calls and bad decisions. And a great example of that was a disaster a couple of years ago in terms of the cruise liner that ground into the island in Italy. In terms of the captain of that vessel was an intelligent guy. He spent many years within the cruise industry. He'd moved up to be a captain. You've obviously got to pass exams and be reasonably intelligent to captain a cruise liner. He obviously worked hard, but on that fateful day, he made a decision that he was going to go too close to the island, and obviously the cruise liner ran aground. So basically, he made a bad call on that day, but he was certainly intelligent and he certainly knew his stuff. But for some reason, his overconfidence caused him to make a mistake. So don't think just because we're all intelligent within an industry that we're quite successful in, we will not make bad calls, because history has demonstrated that individuals who are equally clever and hardworking and endeavour to do the right thing do make bad calls, and very often it's because of the intelligence of individuals that is drive them to make mistakes, that rather than sort of protecting them from making these sort of decisions. So in terms of practical tips, in terms of signals in your QMS, so there are signals. One big signal is what is known as near miss events. So these are issues which could have been recalls, but which are caught within the quality system, generally just through sheer luck. So an individual sees a box that's mislabeled, and a container hasn't the right product in. So basically, the containment systems and the quality checks within the QMS haven't caught it, and it's just been sheer luck that they've been captured and recalls been prevented. So these near miss events are giving you really big signals in terms of the ability of your QMS to contain defects. Likewise, your complaint data and customer feedback is giving you a big signal in terms of the quality of your product leaving your plants and the ability of your QMS to satisfy their needs. And obviously, internal observations where you peer into your own organisation yourself are giving you good indications of whether of the health of your QMS and the ability of your quality system to meet the needs of those three customer groups we discussed previously. Now, obviously, this set of data is fairly useless if nobody reacts to it. So, basically, one of the big learnings is that individuals need to be in a position where they can put their hand up and say, I've seen something that I don't think is right, and we need to start acting on that. So if you have a near miss event and nobody reports it, or a customer complaint that nobody puts their hand up and highlights this is an issue that we need to look at, and likewise internal observations which are ignored, then basically the organisation won't learn and actually understand that and take appropriate corrective action to prevent something more disastrous happening potentially down the line. So really your role as a quality leader is to make sure your staff are fully comfortable with putting their hand up and saying, actually, I've seen something, but I think we need to sort it out, because obviously, reacting then is going to cost far less than reacting to a bigger disaster if that issue is actually ignored. And really you as a leader really have to make sure that you set the expectations within your organization that individuals do feel comfortable in a non-blame sort of environment, that they can actually put their hands up and actually highlight quality issues. If you don't do that, then it will drive quality issues on the ground, and basically it's on a road to ruin in terms of your ability to improve your QMS. Now, this slide really talks about how much risk tolerance you will accept. So you could be an organisation where basically you've got a very low risk tolerance, and you really want to sort of clamp down on any potential risks. So this is really the right hand side of that spectrum on the slide. So you can do that, but you will generate an organisation that's highly bureaucratic. You will expend a huge amount of resource maintenance that level of risk aversion, and it will be very, very inflexible. Conversely, you can say, actually, I'm really comfortable with risk, actually, and you're quite happy with low risk protection. That will have less resource requirements, and you'll be highly flexible. But obviously, your potential for things happening will actually be far higher. So you've got to decide as a leader where you sit on this QMS stringency, in terms of where you sit on this spectrum, whether you want to be a sort of a highly stringent QMS that controls everything versus a more laid back, more sort of hands-off QMS in terms of QMS stringency. On one extreme, you may be very compliant, but it will cost you a lot in terms of resources, and the other extreme, you may have compliance issues, but it will be very light touch, but you may have quality issues you need to address. And really, as a leader, you've got to decide where you want to sit on this spectrum. Generally, it's somewhere in the middle, in terms of the balance between being highly stringent and highly bureaucratic versus being of lower stringency, but having sort of lower risk protection. Another practical tip is you need to start thinking of approaches where you can embed risk management throughout your organization. So it's generally confined to areas such as new product development, but you really should start the conversation of how you move it away from that area and actually start moving it not just down through the organization, but across through the organization. And really, effective risk management really is a core competency of a quality professional, and it is the very essence of quality management. The balancing risks with potential benefits, and really the conversation really should be how can I use this methodology not just in distinct areas such as development of products, but how can I use that throughout the organization to make the right balanced data driven decisions for your customers. One of the things you also have to do is start breaking down information barriers. So you as a leader need to make sure your organization has the right information in the right hands, and the right people are actually making the right decisions. So basically, if information is siloed across the organization, it's more difficult to actually make the right data-driven decisions. and basically, data-driven decisions and a degree of critical thinking and reflection are one of the things that can protect you against the abuse of information or the lack of information. So you've got to have the right information in the right hands, but also you've got to approach it from the right direction, and we'll come on to that. Importantly, you've really got to start driving a learning environment. So basically, as I said, if individuals put their hands up in terms of raising quality issues, then that is the right thing. And you've got to sort of foster an environment that the organisation and individuals can learn from issues and mistakes and move forward. One of the conflicts is basically we don't live in a black or white world, and a lot of decisions are in the sort of grey area. When you take a risk-balanced approach, very often you find that you will make mistakes. You will make the wrong call. And basically, one of the things you as a leader needs to do is to make sure that individuals are comfortable making the wrong decisions, as long as they actually learn from that experience. So there will be times when individuals will make, based on the data they have and their perspective, what looks like an incorrect decision with hindsight, but actually, what you need to do is make sure that individuals learn from that process going forward, such that it doesn't happen again. Another practical tip is actually moving the decision making down through the organisation to where the information is. So a great quote from David Markett's book in terms of is basically move the information to authority as opposed to moving authority to information. Basically, what you should do is not move the data up through the management chain to yourself to make decisions. Can you move that decision making process down through the business where the information and the data is being generated, on the production floor and closer to the customer? And ask yourself, am I the most appropriate person to be making this decision? And really not try to micromanage at the cellular level all of the decisions in your business. Can you move those sort of that decision making ability down to the appropriate level, and basically try to build competency and capability such that decision making can be closer to the customer and can be more nimble in terms of reacting to customer needs. Another tip is basically, if you want to get to the right decision, you're going to have to get a range number of diverse views. So basically, encourage diverse viewpoints. This is one of the things that will protect you against what is known as my side bias, or basically your opinion. You said this is the solution and this is the way forward, and actually you feel because you've got your authority within the organisation that you are right. But actually, if you had more diverse views, you may come to the right answer, and that's one way to protect you from this sort of self bias of your position is being clouded by lack of information generated by my more diverse viewpoints. And diversity is not just about ethnic and gender and sexual equality. It's more about, have you got a rounded organisation? If you do an FME, have you got a range of individuals in there with different perspectives? Are you generating constructive dialogue within the business in terms of different stances and viewpoints? Are you probing and testing, different perspectives to really get to the truth, which is really essentially what you're trying to do, doing a risk assessment exercise. And really, you need to start driving risk management, not just at the high level in terms of new product development, but into the sort of the core of the business. And basically, as I said, balancing risks with opportunities is the core attribute of any effective quality professional. And really, you need to make sure that you start building your organization in terms of capability, that people can demonstrate that on a daily basis, in terms of their ability to make risk-based decisions. Now, this is a great book from Jennifer Garber-Berger, and basically explores some of the sort of, my side traps you can and some mind traps you can get caught up into in terms of your perspective as a leader in terms of assessing risk and ways to sort of unlock those sort of barriers. So on the left hand side, we'll just go some of the mind traps she explores in her book. So very often our mind trap is we want things to be simple. When we look at the real world, we want things to have a simple story, but actually the real world isn't like that. And very often the real world is very complicated and complex and moving. And very often that blinds us to what we're seeing. We see a very simple solution when actually it's not really a simple scenario. So the protection against that is to try and approach any scenario with different viewpoints. Can you come up with three different conflicting perspectives that would explain adequately the same scenario you're seeing? It's not just your own one, but try and put on different hats in terms of seeing issues from different perspectives. Just because you feel it's right and doesn't mean it is right. So basically, as a leader, very often you think, well, this is the solution, but start asking yourself and being quite self-critical. How could I be wrong? Listen to learn, not fix. So basically, there's a degree of reflection and reflexivity in terms of your ability to sort of take data and pause in terms of question yourself. Am I coming at this from the wrong direction? Is there more information I need? So you really need to probe yourself in terms of being quite self-critical in terms of your ability to make decisions and really question, well, am I making the right decision? Very often, and related to that, is that if you're in an environment where people don't have this active, constructive dialogue in terms of diverse viewpoints, everybody comes to agreement very quickly, and you can come to an agreement on the wrong solution. So basically, looking for agreement very often robs you of good ideas. So you need to start encouraging some conflicting opinions, which are equally valid. You've obviously got to land on one decision, but the more different perspectives you can get, the better. And that really will protect you against some of the my side bias that I covered previously. Very often as a leader, you want to take control, and basically, one of the big learnings is sometimes you just got to take a step back and observe and experiment and actually say, I actually don't know. So this does require a fair degree of humility in terms of a competency as a leader, but really this is really needed if you really want to get to as I said, the real truth about any scenario in terms of assessing risk or understanding a situation far better. And the last mind trap is very often where people, we've got egos and we want to be seen to be right all the time and etc. But that sometimes you need to put that to one side and ask yourself, what do I do? What do I want to be next? What is the next stage in terms of my development? This is not about me, it's about the organization, it's about the customer, it's about the end user, and really put your own ego to one side and sort of take a more sort of humble perspective in terms of getting to the truth and understanding the challenges your business are facing. So the next section we'll just look through some of the different aspects of organizations where they sit on the maturity model, and sort of attributes that you can see and sort of things you can do to move through the maturity model. Again, you've got the 4 levels. So really an organization that's sitting on the base level of unaware, basically when you look at an organization that's exhibiting this sort of level of behavior, it's really got the inability to balance risk with opportunities. It's really quite poor. Very often risk management is largely restricted to new product development, and basically areas where the regulations say you must use risk management in that context, it tends to be focused on there. Very often there's no documents outside the area to give risk management guidance across the organisation, and it's approached from risk management. Even then, risk management approach from a very compliance perspective. The regulations say we have to do this. It's not approached from the perspective of the risk management is used to better understand the challenges that the organisation has and ways of actually overcoming those challenges. Very often the implications of not making a change are generally not considered, and very often the perspectives in assessing risk are very, very limited. Very often the quality organisation approaches risk from a very reactive rather than a proactive perspective, and generally taking balanced risks is generally not encouraged within an organisation that's sitting at the aware level, and very often you have a generally risk-averse culture in terms of behaviours, and as a result, the organisation may not necessarily be in the right place in terms of ability to exploit the future and build strategy, and it can be quite conservative in its decision making. And then one of the consequences of that is some opportunities in the future are not jumped upon and exploited, because the organisation is sort of paralysed with its inability to take appropriate balance risk-based decisions. So there's a lack of understanding in terms of how you do that. And very often there's no decision, or there's no decision at all is ever made in terms of moving forward. And then really one of the challenges that an organisation has in this sort of level of maturity is to start moving the concept of risk management away from a compliance centric sort of approach, more as a tool to be used across the business in terms of improving the outcomes for your customers. So to move to the next level of aware, then an organisation at this level really needs to start moving risk management into other areas it's not mandated, and basically integrate that into more of the decision-making process, and also encourage the business to take a more pragmatic approach to managing risk. You need to start pushing against the sort of risk-averse culture that may be apparent in the organisation, and you really need to sort of start rolling out documentation and training, which talks about risk management and sort of stuff we talked about in the last couple of sessions in terms of risk management tools outside of quality and more broadly across the business, and really start getting wider perspectives in terms of inputs in terms of assessing risk. Now, an organisation that sits at the next level is beginning to get there. It's still risk management is still largely restricted to areas such as new product development. Again, documentation is very restricted in terms of explaining risk management, and it's tend to be centred around that sort of approach. Again, very compliance perspective, but the organisation is beginning to understand that this is not the place the organisation or the business needs to be, and there's some indication that the organisation understands it needs to move those risk-based decisions outside of those areas of competency that are basically directed by the regulations, and more how risk management is embedded within the organisation on a day-to-day basis. So to move to the next level, really, again, it's all around expanding the amount of guidance and documentation and training of this approach across the organisation, and also trying to apply risk management from a more proactive than a reactive perspective. And really, you as a leader, so to move your organisation into learning, you've got to have to be able to demonstrate with real examples, how a pragmatic risk-based approach actually moves the organisation forward in terms of its ability to manage risks. So an organisation that's sitting on learning really is understanding how to balance risks with opportunities, and its risk management approaches are much more effective. It's taking a more proactive approach. There are more tools available that move outside the normal sort of remit of risk management in terms of new products. There's good awareness of those tools in terms of which ones to use, are becoming more consistent. You're beginning to consider other risks other than sort of patient risks, compliance risks, cost risks. They're all looked through the lens of risk management. You're also beginning to be aware of actually the potential of not making a decision. There's also a risk of not doing something, so that's beginning to become more apparent. You're beginning to get different perspectives in terms of risk management approaches. You're conscious that you need to get alternative viewpoints, and related to that, you're more conscious that sometimes you just need to wait to ensure you make the right decision rather than making the wrong decision very, very quickly. And leadership is beginning to sort of, demonstrate on a daily basis the ability to make balanced risks is really an opportunity for growth for the business, as attempting to sort of drive those sort of behaviours not just through the board level but down through the organisation in terms of the ability to manage risk and control risk and obviously exploit opportunities. Now, to move to mastery, the organisation really needs to sort of really continue that journey in terms of embedding risk management down through the organisation, in terms of sharing the power that risk management has across the organisation, and also through specific examples where senior management have made a decision and articulated why the decision is as such, and basically how that's balanced, the risks versus the opportunities. So really, it's a company at Mastery is beginning to sort of live and breathe risk management. it's begun to understand that it needs to sort of fight against the siloed and blinkered approaches in terms of assessing risk, in terms of making sure data is more available, and basically, demonstrating that sometimes you need to wait to understand events more clearly than when to act. So really, at Mastery, an organisation really is really good at sort of balancing risks with opportunities. Leaders see risks as an opportunity to grow the business, and serve the patient, and effectively leading by example. Employees are encouraged to come up with alternative viewpoints. Decisions are made with a clear understanding of probability, and basically any mistakes and incorrect decisions are used as learning opportunities. And balanced risks are taken, but not in a reckless manner. In terms of everybody makes everything's up for grabs. So basically, it's not done in a reckless way. It's basically done as a balanced approach to balancing the risks with opportunities. There's a lot of documentation in terms of guidance within the organisation, so this is beginning to be embedded within the business. And ultimately, the needs of the customer outweigh compliance and cost implications. So people are beginning to understand that actually there's a bigger picture in terms of just meeting risk management objectives from a sort of a customer-centric perspective, rather than just because the regulations say you have to use it. And basically, what an organisation operating at this level really is effectively trying to work out win-win outcomes for all of those customer groups. And a company at this level really is applying it proactively and reactively throughout the organisation. It's evident, in all aspects of the quality system, and individuals throughout the organisation have a deep understanding of their ability to manage risk and how that cascades down through its impact on the customers. And so, really, a company at this level really, in risk management really is embedded throughout the organisation. I mean, and the company at this level to continue just to do more of the same, to keep investing in risk management, keep talking about it, and keep making sure that your organisation understands at every level how powerful and appropriate risk management methodology and strategy is in terms of improving your business. Now, this is really the summary slide in terms of the module on risk. Really, to summarise, really effective risk management is really your only protection against making bad decisions and harming your business. There are a lot of tools out there. There's lots of methodology, and really encourage you to use it and also cascade it down through your organisations. In terms of understand the inherent risks within the process, in terms of these tools aren't magic in terms of getting you the answer. They involve people in terms of individuals have to fill them in, and basically they've got their own biases and perspectives and positions, and be aware of that in terms of your protection against that is to get a lot of diverse views, to temper that. Temper that with critical thinking and reflection. Very often you just need the data. Making a decision quickly isn't always the right decision. Very often you just need to have enough data and reflect to make the appropriate decision, but also know when at times you just need to go ahead and make a decision and move forward. Again, document. These are things that the inspectors look at in very, very often in terms of risk management, and basically these documents, these FMEAs, should be living documents, and related to that, constantly revise your risk management approaches and the documentation to reflect current state. So if a regulator comes in and sees this as evidence and it's embedded within your organisation, then they will be very satisfied and very confident that you're using the appropriate methodology to build and grow and protect your customer going forward.